Hi, this is Stuart Weems, and welcome to the fifth and final installment of this fundamental series where I've taken time to explain some really important financial planning concepts in hopefully a really simple and easy way to understand. So certainly check out the playlist of the other four episodes in this series, and hopefully you've enjoyed them and will continue to enjoy them. In this episode, I'd like to talk about a really simple way to manage your cash flow. And let me start by acknowledging most people find this topic really boring. I get it, but it's really important and it's really fundamental in terms of your ability to manage your cash flow. If you're able to do that really well, chances are, or probability is, that you will do really well from a financial standpoint. And the flip side is that if you aren't so good at managing your cash flow, you are always going to struggle to build wealth. And it really is just that fundamental. So in this few short minutes, I hope that I can share with you a really simple way to manage your cash flow that doesn't feel like you're budgeting or limiting yourself from month to month, which is, what we're always trying to avoid. Of course, all the information in this presentation is general in nature, so certainly consider whether it's appropriate for you. And if you're unsure, you should seek out personalized advice. So why is cash flow management so important? Well, it's kind of obvious, right? If you spend everything you earn, you've got nothing left over to invest. It's really difficult to build wealth. But really, the biggest problem with respect to spending is to minimize or eliminate unconscious expenditure. Unconscious expenditure is expenses that you don't really think very carefully about, that probably don't add a lot to your standard of living. That is a waste. That's what I would call a waste of money. So let me give you an example. An example of conscious expenditure, a perfect example of conscious expenditure, is going on a holiday. Like if we're going to go book a holiday, we think very deeply about where we're going to go, how much are we going to spend, how long are we going to stay, what level of accommodation are we going to stay in, how are we going to get there. All those sorts of decisions go towards the cost and therefore the enjoyment of the holiday. Because it is very deliberate and very conscious, we get a lot of satisfaction or utility from that expense. Like holidays is probably one of the best value for money things that we spend on, not because they're cheap. Of course, holidays are expensive, but because they add so much to our standard of living. They really, if you've worked and saved hard for a couple of years to be able to afford this particular holiday, you're going to really enjoy it. Whereas the flip side or the reverse of conscious expenditure is unconscious expenditure. A good one is like takeaway coffees, for example. I might be going somewhere on my way. I think I'll grab a coffee, and I'll pay $6 or $7 for that coffee. I'll drink the coffee, and probably half an hour later, if not sooner, I'll forget that I had the coffee, that I enjoyed the coffee. It's not that big a deal. I could have waited till my destination. If I was going to the office, I could have made a coffee in the office. And actually, I wouldn't have felt any different in terms of enjoyment. I would have got my caffeine hit, and it is what it is. That's the sort of unconscious spending that you need to minimize or eliminate as much as possible. Now, the good news is that by eliminating it, not only are you saving money, but you're not actually going to feel it. Like you're not going to feel like you're denying yourself. Whereas if you said, I can't eliminate all holidays for the next 5 years, you're going to feel that, that's going to be a big problem. The second benefit of cash flow management is that you need to spend less than you earn and invest the difference. Now, investing the difference could be saving to buy your first property. It could be making additional super contributions. It could be repaying debt. Whatever it is, you need to be contributing on a regular basis a certain amount of money to your financial future. You need to spend some today and enjoy today, but also you need to save for tomorrow. And the last benefit of managing cash flow well is it'll give you a very good idea of what you need to aim for. So we find that people spend the same amount in retirement as they do when they're working. The total dollar value amount doesn't really change. What they spend money on can change, certainly, because there's some expenses that you won't have when you're retired, and vice versa. But we find the total amount doesn't change. So if you're spending $80,000 a year on general living expenses, then you kind of know that's what I'm going to need in retirement. Now, if you have no idea what you're spending, then it's going to be much harder then to plan for retirement and so forth. So the best way then to manage spending is really to understand that there's 3 categories of expenses. And each category of expense requires a different management style. So the first one is non-discretionary expenses. These are bills, utilities. You can't overspend in this category. For example, insurance, it is what it is, right? You get the premium renewal notice. You know what the insurance is going to cost over the next 12 months. There's no way you can overspend in this category. For non-discretionary expenses, all you need to do is review them 1 or 2 times a year. So shop your insurance around, shop your electricity around. You can't shop schooling fees around very much. Mortgages, of course. So you want to make sure you're getting a good deal for these items, but you only really need to look at it probably once every 12 months just to make sure you are getting a good deal or to switch to a new provider. Other than that, you don't need to do anything with them. You don't need to worry about them so much. They will just occur and they're relatively predictable in terms of what their cost is. The next category is conscious discretionary spending. So holidays, as I said in the last slide, is a perfect example. If you're conscious about your spending, you don't need to worry about it. Most people make good conscious decisions. So for example, if they're contemplating spending some money and this, going and buying a new pair of shoes or something that are really expensive, some designer shoes, and they're not really in a position to be able to afford it, 99% of the time, people are going to make the right decision. They won't buy them because they're being conscious and deliberate about it. So you don't really need to worry too much about conscious expenditure because you're already consciously thinking about it. It's the third category that requires all your attention. It's unconscious discretionary spending. So this can include things like monthly subscriptions, Netflix, Stan, all those sorts of things, takeaway coffee, just stuff that fills the cupboards at home that you might use once and then put it in the cupboard and never look at it again. Often this category is dominated by many low-value items. They're not big-ticket items, but they can be literally thousands of smaller ticket items, which can make it a little bit more difficult to manage. But this is where you need to pay all your attention to. And there's a really, really easy way to manage it. And it's really just making sure that you pay all those discretionary expenses from a dedicated account. So here's the structure that I recommend is that you have a primary sort of savings or offset account. So it can be an offset account attached to a mortgage. If you don't have a mortgage, then it's just your primary savings account. It will receive all your income and pay for all non-discretionary expenses like loan repayments, bills, insurances, education, all those sorts of things, all the sort of stuff that the expenses that you can't overspend on, that you kind of know they're predictable, you know what they are and what they're going to be. Again, as I said, you just need to shop them around every 12 months, but you don't really need to track them in terms of what did I spend on my mortgage last month because you don't have a lot of control over it. And then what you do is you transfer a set amount each pay cycle. So if you get paid weekly or fortnightly, into a spending account, which is a completely separate account. So let's say that you transfer $5,000 a month, for example, in this spending account. You should pay for all discretionary expenses from this account. Anything that isn't a non-discretionary expense, of course, so shopping, groceries, eating out, cash withdrawals, all those sorts of expenses. If you use a credit card and you've only got one credit card and you pay for some expenses, then just maintain a running balance of all the discretionary expenses. So for example, if I have a credit card, I will repay that credit card from the spending account each month, so repay the balance down to zero. If I've used that card during the month for, say, a non-discretionary expense, I've paid a power bill, for example, just repay that power bill straight away from the number one savings/offset account, so that you only use the card really for discretionary expenses, and that way you can track it. And that way at the end of the month, then if the balance is $2,000, well, you know you can sweep out $2,000 from your spending account and then allow you to track it. The benefit of this approach is that you don't need to track every single expense. All you need to do is track it at an aggregate level. And so, for example, if I'm transferring $5,000 a month into my spending account, and I'm halfway through the month and I've got $500 left, I know I've spent too much and I can kind of course correct and deal with that. Now, from month to month, you're going to spend less than 5,000, and some months it's unavoidable, you will spend more than 5,000. But over a longer period of time, 6 or 12 months, hopefully it kind of evens out. But what you will find is that you will be unconsciously more conscious about your spending, which means that you won't be sitting there thinking, oh, I won't buy that takeaway coffee, but you'll just naturally kind of course correct and not buy it because you're going to be more conscious about what you're doing and what you're spending your money on. I have found this the most successful way to manage cash flow for clients. It's worked for every single client that I've shown it to. And the reason it works is because you don't need to spend much time worrying about it. You don't need to track your expenses. You don't need to keep receipts, all those sorts of things. Just look at it at an aggregate level. So if you've enjoyed this presentation, I write a blog every week. There's a link in the show notes to subscribe to that blog where I share lots of ideas around investing and managing money well. So if that's interesting to you, please check that out. And also check out the other 4 presentations in this series. Hope that's been really helpful. Cheers.